I'm back with another album review. Today's review is on Houses of the Molé by Ministry. This is the band's ninth studio album and was when things really got political with their music. The album was produced solely by Al Jorgensen, who would be the sole producer on most of the band's subsequent releases. Recording and production took place at Sonic Ranch Studios. The engineer was Cole Marshall, who had assistance from Marco A. Ramirez. The album was released on June 21st, 2004 on Sanctuary Records. What's special about this album is that it's the first Ministry album to feature guitarist Mike Scaccia since Filth Pig. The band also brought back the thrash metal elements and doubled down on being political. The album itself is the first in a trilogy of anti-George W. Bush albums from the band, and shitting on the Bush administration was the norm back in the 2000s. Other bands such as Bad Religion, Rise Against, Pearl Jam, Colonel Claypool's Bucket of Bernie Brains, Green Day, Nine Inch Nails, KMFDM, System of a Down, and Audioslave are just some examples of bands who made songs and even entire albums dedicated to saying fuck you to the Bush administration. After all, that administration was the biggest reason why the 2000s actually sucked ass. One of the only good things about that shit show of a decade was the anti-George W. Bush albums. I saw an episode of Last Meals that Serge Tankian said that bad presidents made for good music, and he's got a point. Anyways, the album was released in the months leading up to the 2004 US presidential election. Well, most of the songs start with the letter W. Al Jorgensen said that the title is a reference to the album Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. He also described the album as a rebirth for the band, and that it was their first album with no involvement from Paul Barker since Twitch. Now let's talk about the songs. The album starts with No W, which was released as a single in 2004. This is my favorite song on the album. I've seen people compare this track to NWO since that song is a giant fuck you to George H.W. Bush. And No W is a giant fuck you to George W. Bush. What's really awesome is that this track was that it was featured in the games Need for Speed Underground 2 and Tony Hawk's Underground 2. And both games were released in 2004. The only one of those games I actually played was Need for Speed Underground 2. And No W is my favorite song from that game. The version that's in the games doesn't contain the O Fortuna sample. It still retains samples of Bush's speech regarding the War on Terror. A music video was made, and there's a link in the description. You can actually see one of the guys wearing a shirt that says, "Fuck Bush." And I think that's Mike Scaccia wearing the shirt. Correct me if I'm wrong. The next track is Waiting. This is another one of my favorite tracks on the album. These guys have played at various live shows, and they knocked it out of the park from what I've seen. And after that is Worthless. The track itself is a way of saying that George Bush is worthless, hence the title. Next up is Wrong. Al was on guitar while Mark Baker was on drums, and John Monty was on bass. Most of the tracks had Ray Washam on drums, but he was uncredited for some reason. According to Mark Prindle, Ray made a claim about this album having the worst title ever, but I completely disagree. Up next is Warp City. The same personnel from the previous track perform on this track. But there are also backing vocals from Angie J, Carl Wayne, John Monty, Mark Baker, Mike Scaccia, and Odin Myers. We followed up with WTV. Mike was on bass while Max Brody had handled programming. Now that's followed up by World. Al was on bass while Max handled programming. Right after that is WKYJ. Al was on guitar and bass, Max was on drums, Cole Marshall was on the organ, and Turner Van Blarcom was on the turntable. The following track is Worm. Al was on guitar and harmonica, Mike was on bass and provided backing vocals, Cole was on the organ, and programming saxophone were provided by Max. Additional backing vocals are provided by Angie and Max. What's ironic is that this track lasts 9 minutes and 11 seconds, and conspiracy theorists believe that George Bush was responsible for 9/11. Tracks 10 through 20 are completely silent, lead into a hidden bonus track called Psalm 23, which just happens to be track 23. Tracks 24 through 68 are completely silent and lead into another hidden bonus track. The track is number 69 and is titled Walrus. It is essentially Al's diss track towards Paul Barker. According to Al's autobiography, the line, "Paul is no longer with us," is played on repeat, albeit with the audio reversed. In other words, it's a backmask. When researching this album, I read that it didn't chart on the Billboard 200, causing the band to leave Sanctuary Records. It did chart as number 135 in the UK and 162 in France, however. As for the critics, there was pretty high praise since the album has a 75 on Metacritic. Hell, Rock Hard gave it a perfect score. However, those cocksuckers at Q, Rolling Stone, and the Rolling Stone album guy didn't like it. Don't be surprised if those dumb fucks supported Bush. Now for my thoughts. I think this is a great album. It essentially was a comeback for the band. And I think that it was a smart decision for these guys to make this an anti-Bush album. There's a lot of bands that make political music, and I don't think anyone does it better than Ministry. This is only part of the reason why they're one of my all-time favorite bands, and not just my favorite industrial band. Overall, I highly recommend this album. Now it's part where I question you. Have you listened to Houses of the Molé? If so, what do you think about it? What's your favorite song from it? Who do you think is the best political band? And let me know in the comments. If you like the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to press the notification bell to notify of future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another review.